And then we will start with our first speaker, Jamie Robe, Green Day Every Day, Overcoming Inertia.
As you see in the bulletin, we have 4 speakers that follow me, and one is a professor, and one's a farmer, one's an artist and musician at the same time, and a carpenter too, right? And one is a psychologist, and they're all going to speak about climate change and what is motivating them and setting a positive future. And I was thinking about 4 things that we have to do in my mind, and one is that we have to empty our ego. Just like the reading that I did, we tend to take positions, and so all we care about is our position. Are we right or wrong? Are we conservative? Are we liberal or whatever? But we're facing a problem that needs action. So we have to transcend where we are right now, and we have to break free of our constraints that we've set for ourselves. One of the things that I love myself is sci-fi. I love science fiction. I'm a big Star Trek fan and other sci-fi. But if you go back in science fiction, it's interesting how people have a vision for things. I don't know if you've read Jules Verne's, The Trip to the Moon, From the Earth to the Moon. And he wrote that in 1865. And it wasn't until 1969 that we actually got to the moon. But if you ever look at that, you look it up on Wikipedia or something and read about it. It's very interesting. But Jules Verne, 100 years before it happened, he envisioned a mission to the moon. And there were 3 astronauts in the capsule. The capsule was called the Columbia, which was the same as the 3 astronauts in the Apollo 11 mission. They named their capsule the Columbia. And they launched from Central Florida. They actually launched from Tampa town, he called it. It was just 100 miles from the actual launch place. So of the whole world, Jules Verne picked Central Florida. And they went to the moon, and they came back, and they landed in the Pacific Ocean, which is exactly what happened. There were other things that he actually wrote about that are kind of freaky when you see it. But he had a vision. And there were other visionaries, too. Obviously, the technology people and things that President Kennedy gave a speech, and then just a few years later, we actually went to the moon. But what concerns me now is we can't go back to the moon. It's been 40 years, right? I think that's a lot of years since the moon mission. I was a little kid. But we have to do something today that's going to be in that scale. So if the government isn't going to do everything that needs to be done, or businesses aren't going to do everything, we have to do it ourselves too. One of the things that Kim and I learned a lot over the past couple of years, we've driven only electric cars, which was very scary at first. I'm not stealing any of your speech, Kim, but I had a Prius for years and years, and I actually had an electric car before that. That was a terrible battery range, was lead acid batteries, and but the Prius was great, but it was literally falling apart. And we ended up getting an electric car, and then we ended up getting a second one. And not going to the gas station is a possibility, a real possibility. Of course, you say, well, it's burning fossil fuels somewhere to power the car when we charge up, but we're actually literally 8 days away from getting solar panels in our house. All of these things are really scary because they cost money and commitment, and some people think that we're just wasting our money. Why not wait till the cars are better, or why not wait, or whatever. But we can't wait anymore. We have to do something now. But I feel like we are at a turning point, and I'm excited about our speakers because I've actually had contact with them in different ways. Dr. Sharon Hanna-West, we put on, with a whole bunch of people, we put on a Going Green Expo at USF years ago, and that was a kind of a yeah, it was a really cool experience. And USF's done a lot of things, and it sounds like they might do more with the Going Green bull runners driving around. And John is a sustainability expert, if there is one. He also is a host of a radio program on WMNF, if you've never caught that. And Kim and I got to be on it a couple times about our cars. And of course, Jeff is he's like a Renaissance man with everything he does. So I appreciate him. And then Kim is actually Dr. Kimberly Robe. She never goes by her PhD thing, but she's going to talk about change as well. So with that, John, you want to come up?
Lots of good glasses recently. I'm having a little hard time with them. And of course, I caught a cold, and I thought, well, I got to bring some water or something. And I said, well, they'll have bottled water there at the Unitarian Church. But anyhow, I got my peanut butter jar, and I'm sure it's all right with everybody. But thank you for inviting me. I always kind of jump on the bandwagon when we kind of talk about this topic. And of course, you know, Jamie sent the email to me, and you know, I kind of volunteered, and then I got to looking at it again. He says, well, you got to be positive. So I'm scratching my head. I'm saying, well, gee whiz, what's there positive to talk about? You know, last year was the warmest year on record, and of course, there's I like to look at the climate blogs, and January and February were warmest months, you know, and you're going, well, gee whiz, we got to do something. As far as positive, I kind of picked 4 things out. Obviously, one, Jamie's putting some solar panels on his house. Well, the price of solar has really dropped. You know, we started, we were the first, our little farm and our little expenditure was, we were the first to do a solar intertie with TECO back in 2006. And I paid $4 a watt for my solar panels. And actually, they came, and it was evergreen solar, but anyhow, it was Shell solar. So you start thinking, well, gee whiz, that was probably a bad idea. And actually, we just replaced those panels. They were warranted for 20 years, but we just replaced them with some that we paid 70 cents a watt. So you kind of start thinking about that. That's, you know, the first ones we paid about, what was it, $700, and these we paid, you know, a lot less. Well, 70 times 240, I forget what the actual price is, but it's about a quarter of what it, you know, solar costs back then. And of course, everything else has gone up. Food's gone up, and I thought this is really cool with the new inverters, the grid tie inverters. Really, you don't have to kind of have the old lead acid batteries and those kind of things. And then I guess the next thing, you know, I think is very positive is the lithium powered batteries, which Jamie, like he says, the electric car today is so much cooler than the old lead acids. And I was kind of like Jamie and Tom. I had an old S10 that was converted. It had 20 6-volt golf cart batteries, but the problem was you had a load before you left. You know, like these are about 75 pounds apiece times 20, and then you had to have another one to run the other stuff. And of course, it was just it was like a you know, a caveman, you know, like something Fred Flintstone would be driving around in. But no, it's that and just the implications of, like, now you can buy an electric chainsaw. You know, you can buy an electric lawnmower. You can buy all these things, and they work, and they do well. You know, the voltage keeps going up. And I think that was kind of the whole revolution was, you know, kind of coming to the thing, say, well, you know, we can't, you know, have a 12-volt system or a 24-volt system or a 48-volt system. And it's just like my system, and you know, like the inverters don't even kick on until you get about 300 volts in them. And you know, that's kind of physics there. You can put a lot of pressure down a little line, and you run these little wires instead of big wires. But I thought those were 2 really positive things, and I feel like everybody ought to consider it. And you know, you hear all the time people worry about penetrations in the roof, you know, screwing this stuff down, but they really know what they're doing. I mean, it's a no-brainer. and then I hear a lot of people talk about trees, like, oh, well, the tree's shading the house and we can't cut the tree down. Well, I think we're in that point in life where we need to consider cutting down the tree. And really, I don't know, we in this area, we lived through the hurricanes in 2005, and I don't know how they were in Tampa, but in Plant City, they were very scary. And, you ever have a tree fall on your house, it's a very serious thing. And really, there's a place for trees, but I really think that the south side of our roofs on our houses, they need to have solar panels on there. And I don't care what the people at TECO say, or Florida Power, or Duke Energy. That's all craziness. Really, the most important thing we can really do is kind of consider that, because that is just like Jamie will probably be charging his electric vehicle, and you end up with this something that 20 years ago we couldn't really fathom, is this economy where we don't have fossil fuel. And the last kind of three things are related that I kind of think is positive. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, to me, this concept of democratic socialism, I really, I'm into that. I think, Jesus was a socialist. I think down in my heart, that's what I've always been. That's, to me, the definition is a society is based on the needs of society and not money. And I really kind of see that as the reason, like Jamie says, it's up to us as individuals to do stuff, but as long as we're being led astray by this greed-based system where it don't make any difference, what you sell is the bottom line. And you see Goldman Sachs and all these places, you get billions of dollars of fines and stuff. But it's the reality is that's the type of system that you kind of end up with. And that's the problems we are in the world, that people, want to sell stuff, it's not sustainable, and they get away with doing it. And of course, WM&F is kind of like a socialist institution. You don't really, you don't get an ad. The information isn't tainted. And I think that that's another very positive thing, at least about living in this area, that we do have this source. It's not a perfect source, but it's a source of information that we can get easily that isn't tainted by an advertiser, Kellogg's or Nabisco or TECO or Duke Energy. They're not in there showing, hey, now you can't say that, you can say this. I get on M&F and, a lot of times I don't choose to, I'm a farmer. Nothing to do with a public speaker or doing a radio show, but it's when I go there, nobody's telling me what I got to talk about. And I can talk about composting toilets, we can talk about electric vehicles, and we can talk about all kinds of things that normally you wouldn't hear. So I think that that's a very positive thing. And of course, opening up in Cuba. And, for so long, there's been this disinformation out about this country. This little poor country that's south of us. And in reality, they really kind of faced this sustainability problem when Russia pulled out. And, they ended up with a bunch of tractors with no fuel. And they really have a lot of positive things about their government. And people say, well, John, you're misled, or communist, or this crazy bunch of hateful people, and Fidel Castro's a dictator. But I really think that we need to do our research about Cuba, and hopefully we can see the positive that this change of a country from one direction to a completely different direction. And there was another thing, and I think I've kind of forgot about it, but I think I've kind of run out of time. But thanks again for allowing me to come and talk to you. I think that the future we talk about people worrying about stuff, and I think I read Ecology of Commerce a long time ago, which was kind of one of those first books, not like Silent Spring, but it was about how commerce had to do with sustainability. And the secretary, they talked about her, how she couldn't, she about had a nervous breakdown over this back in the 90s. And I really don't think we just have to be spurred into action. And hopefully things will be good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And now it is time for us to hear from Dr. Sharon Hanna-West.
I just want you to know that I've thrown out most of the notes of the things that I came here to say to you. And I'm almost feeling guilty because I came here to share some things with you, and I think maybe unwittingly you didn't know, but you shared some things with me. One is just the whole way that you do your services here and the way that you already acknowledge kind of passing the torch to future generations, and that has everything and anything to do with sustainability. So Jamie said to me, he said, tell them a little bit about, why you're here, and what you do. So I'll tell you just kind of quickly. I'm a product of growing up in the 1960s and 70s. 1970s was an era of huge environmental awareness. Also after an era of huge environmental harm. Now, at that time, I decided I was going to save the planet, right? That seems, we have lots of optimism when we're young. Anyway, through a circuitous route, I did go to law school where I specialized in environmental law. I also, though, was a product of commerce and people who were involved in business. And I quickly realized that to save the planet, although it might be occasionally satisfying to bring a corporation to task one at a time, it was a very laborious and time-intensive process. So through some different twists and turns in life, which inevitably happen, I ended up being asked to guest lecture at USF, and that was over 20 years ago. I'm now kind of one of their permanent fixtures. At any rate, I started teaching business ethics and stakeholder theory and some things that at the time were a little bit unusual. That movement, though, this whole thing with corporate social responsibility and making corporations realize that they have to be accountable to multiple stakeholders, gave rise to the big movement that we're now seeing in business sustainability. Stakeholder theory means that businesses have to pay attention to more than just their immediate stakeholders, which they're trained in business school to do, and that is shareholders. Of course, we have to pay attention to shareholders. We need to deliver favorable economic returns, but that's not all that's in there. And it's more than employees, and it's more than customers, and it's more than our suppliers. It's also our communities. And I remind my students all the time, the communities give corporations the license to operate, and communities can take it away. And so accountability really has become more of the norm, although we read about the exceptions mostly in the media. Surprisingly, we have most businesses do more than toe the line. They're also trying to be proactive. Today, we know that we have two very important stakeholders that threaten our continued prosperity. One is the Earth's biosphere. The Earth's biosphere is in serious crisis. It's not being debated anymore. Climate change isn't being debated anymore. What is being debated, if you could say there's a debate, is causation, because about 3% of the scientists do dispute causation. 97% say, and this is the world scientists, that, it's human activity is exacerbating this thing. And it's not a question of whether the Earth is going to survive. The Earth's going to be just fine. It's the species that are left on the Earth, and we want to be a part of that. So acknowledging what we do to this planet is critically important, because we have a choice now. We can either help it or we can harm it. When we talk about sustainable business, the whole definition of sustainability kind of comes into question. And the one that I think is the most widely used is the one that rose out of the Brundtland Commission report years ago, back in the 80s, when the United Nations said, hey, we need to look at this idea of economic development and developing countries coming on board to develop and raise their level of prosperity, and this balance that we have, which is environmental pressure. And so the idea that sustainability meant meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs kind of came into focus. And when you had your kids, both, the very tiny ones and our teenagers up here, it came into laser focus for me. We're stealing their future. Ethically, morally, that's got to be wrong, no matter what belief system you subscribe to. When you think about it too, probably most of our environmental harm can be traced to economic activity. So for me, it kind of became a no-brainer that we needed to join forces with business, not fight it, and help business to become sustainable. And what our students have done over the years, and we're working continually, is we help businesses develop sustainable business plans. The big guys get this. The Fortune 500, they all publish sustainability reports, and they do it for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes they do it because they want to have favorable press. They may do it because it is a trigger for enhanced innovation. And they also, because they want to hire our newer generation, and those students today, they feel very strongly about being part of the solution and not part of the problem. So they get that, but my concern is 85% of our economy is small business, and how do we do that? So that's kind of what my work's been focused about. But you may be skeptical. I wanted to just share with you a couple of case studies of businesses and how they change, because we get a lot of the bad press. Now, the one I'm going to mention first is probably going to make many people bristle, but when you think of Walmart, is the Walmart business model sustainable? If you think about what their business model is, it's they sell lots of cheap disposable stuff that's shipped thousands of miles with petrochemical-based fuels. It's not a sustainable business model. Well, they know that, and they get that, and you don't get to be in charge of the world's largest supply chain by being stupid. So what Walmart has done, and they have a long way to go, but what they have done is the first initiative that they're doing is they're putting it on the backs of their supply chain to be sustainable for them. They are requiring that people report their greenhouse gas emission inventory. Now, many of you may not even know what that is. And most businesses in their supply chain, when they received those questions, didn't know what it was. They ask if they've measured it. Are they reporting goals for reduction of that? And they go on and on and on with the use of water, labor, and you could say, well, boy, that's kind of hypocritical for a corporation that's been brought to task, several times. But the Walmart of today, behind the scenes, is decidedly different. I'm not saying they're perfect. None of us are perfect. But the world is changing. And that's the other thing that inspired me. Your first song, the first hymn when I came in was, "Don't be afraid of some change." We shouldn't be afraid of some change. We should embrace this change. Many say that we are at the cusp of the next industrial revolution, and I really believe that. But, just like our first industrial revolution, more than 120 years ago, there were some good, smart people in the room who said, our businesses, our homes are never going to be powered by electricity. It's too expensive. It's unreliable. We're never going to be driving automobiles. They're too expensive. They're unreliable. And that they were very wrong. They weren't stupid people. They were just on the wrong side of the future. We've had a couple of folks talk to us today about their use of solar power. I try to walk the talk. I don't necessarily drive the world's most efficient car, but part of that is I had a car accident and my husband decided I needed to drive something different on my long commutes from Dade City. But my farm, just like theirs, is totally powered by solar. We enjoy it very much. It's pretty much maintenance-free. There are things that, when we have the capability of doing it, I think we almost have an affirmative duty, perhaps, to do it from a moral standpoint. Another example that might encourage you a little bit is Xerox. Okay, so you're Xerox back in the 1990s, and you're thinking, well, we make lots of printers, particularly personal printers, and they print on paper. We use a lot of power because personal printers and all this technology and all that stuff uses power. So how do you become sustainable? Well, you could give up and say, well, we're just going to join the deniers and say that this doesn't matter, it's not happening, and we're going to go on business as usual. Or you can do what they did, and that is the Xerox of today offers very, very different products. They sell very expensive, highly technological, multifunction smart machines that are designed to be put in central locations within corporations. You get rid of your printers. A Xerox representative could come into your company, stick a thumb drive in any computer in the system, and through, it's called a ZOPA study, tell you in 30 minutes exactly how much money you will save in energy, packaging, storage, handling, whatever, by a full conversion to their products. That's how businesses will be sustainable. Nike is going from the business of selling shoes to the business of shoeing people. When you buy a pair of Nikes in the future, you will not dispose of them at Goodwill or anything else. You are going to send them back to the company or to a common collection point where they will take control of those resources and repurpose them into other goods. Again, finite resources are running out. We have to figure out that waste is valuable. And on and on and on it goes. So again, don't be afraid of some change. When you think about it, you probably question what perhaps your role could be. I question it all the time. What could we contribute to help transition to a more sustainable society? Well, there's a lot that we can do. Individually, our actions might not seem like much, but collectively they can make a huge difference. Even spreading the news is important. Leif Sharp, who started the Harvard Green Initiative, came to USF a couple of years ago, and she talked a lot about the power of one. And she said, if you leave today and you go convince 3 people to maybe change the way they live a little bit, change their beliefs in what's important and what's not, and they do the same thing, and on and on and on, in that perfect mathematical equation, which we know probably would not be perfect, but 3 on 3 on 3 on 3, guess what? In 6 months, you have convinced 64,000 people to change. And when you think about that, your power is extremely powerful. When we realize that we are all part of the web of life, and this web is complex, and this web of life is on a beautiful blue-green planet that I understand from space is absolutely amazing to look at. Your choice, again, is to hurt it or to help it. We can either be part of the problem or part of the solution, because really doing nothing anymore is not an option, because doing nothing is destructive. So I urge you to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeff Stover.
Good afternoon. Officially, it's 1 minute after. All right. So as you can see, I didn't waste an opportunity to display my handsome son. So he is my living motivation to make a difference. What I wanted to start with was talking about beginner's mind, which is a Zen Buddhist concept. It's called Shoshin. And in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Zen Master Shunryu Suzuki states, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. So I would like to talk a couple of minutes about having fun. So isn't it curious how children want to help while someone else is working, but later on in life, when it becomes work, it's not interesting? While interning for my art teaching degree, teachers would say things about my projects such as, "Oh, they're just playing," as if it were a waste of time. But many of us have seen the wildlife programs where young animals are at play, and the narrator states that this is training, life training skills along with the play. So it's not just a waste of time. And also, as further, to shed further light on that, by the end of elementary school, most students are convinced that they are not good artists because they have not had a chance to explore and express themselves. They're trying to find a rigid or follow a rigid guideline. And meanwhile, science, math, and literature are very serious business today in education. Now, while researching for this project, I looked at visionary scientist, engineer, and environmentalist who is directly linked to UUCT, Buckminster Fuller. He worked out the math for the geodesic dome, of which we are sitting in an example of today. He coined the term spaceship Earth, which is more relevant than ever as NASA works toward colonizing Mars. And while that is a fascinating project, there are millions of people who do not have what they need right here on this habitat that we live in. In Fuller's operating manual for Spaceship Earth, he points out that in earliest childhood, we dare not think competently regarding our potentials. I believe he is referring to how young children have big dreams, but then have them curtailed by our education and employment culture of specialization, in which we learn a certain small group of skills, leaving us at a loss for the myriad of changes and challenges of life. I agree that in addition to participating in cultural diversity, the liberal arts and sciences are a necessary foundation for a child growing up in a world of constant and accelerating change. I consider myself fortunate to have had a variety of shop classes while in school. This was in the late 70s and 80s, back when we still had shop. But my exposure to the arts and scientists were limited. It was kind of an either or back then, right? So however, while in the military, I was able to travel around the world, experiencing other cultures. And I brought my experience and my skills as a mechanic and a carpenter with me when I started art school at USF later in life. My intentions for Wyatt's overall education are for us to experience diversity in as many possible areas of life that we can. Constantly renewing my own playful attitude and curious mind are what I need to foster in myself, just as he is born with them. A famous movie star once said, "It ain't easy being green." I encourage you to consciously be a green inspiration for the young people in your life, encouraging them to think and learn about the world as a whole. We humans have work to do on our spaceship, some of it being routine maintenance, while some is completely new design and construction. We adults need to lead by example, using the scientific method to have fun while we do the research and develop work needed to find balance with our home. While practicing the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle, we can also plant a garden, build a solar oven, or find a solution to another challenge in our community. I have a few pieces scattered about out in the yard, some wacky machines. So if you see one of those machines, it's probably one of mine. I have one over in the coffee area over in the small dome. And there's the spinning lotus and also another trike, a family trike that I came up with, just using basically upcycling with materials that I find and repurposing them. The cardboard hat project, which is outside where the playground, which is going on outside after the service. That whole idea came about after my first year of art teaching, when I ran out of funding halfway through the year and I had to start going to the cafeteria and harvesting cardboard. I was given $3 per year for each student. That was the budget. So I want you to encourage you to stop by, make a hat, either with or without your child. And I would like to sum up with this quote that I found by Parker Palmer. He's a Quaker columnist for a magazine called On Being. He says, "I'm heading into this spring and summer aspiring to look at life through the eyes of a child. I'm determined to get it. I want to practice what Buddhists call beginner's mind, a vital corrective to the cynicism that comes when we let life's hard realities darken our vision and diminish our imagination. It's a way of looking at the world that makes fresh starts possible in everything, our personal lives, our work lives, and even our political lives. Thanks.
And Dr. Kim Robe.
Okay, friends. Well, I'm going to try to get to the main points quickly. First of all, what an amazing group of people. What an amazing group of speakers. Really inspirational. And like Sharon, Hanna-West, I was really inspired by that beautiful song of the generations calling to each other. It's very moving to me. Anyway, my name is Kim Thomas Robe, in case any of y'all do not know me. And so when Jamie got involved in this project, I spoke up and I said, I have something to say. And then I thought, who said that? Because I don't do a lot of public speaking these days, so bear with me. But I did want to say something, and what I have given some thought to over the years is how we talk about this issue, particularly to children. Now, Jamie and I are the parents of 4 children, and we have between us way more education than any 2 people could possibly need or use. And I'm going to sum up for you right now everything I know about parenting in one sentence, okay? Now, I know there are some of you out there who are newer parents. You might want to write this down, okay? Everything I know about parenting in one sentence. Here it goes. Parenting is very humbling. I'll repeat that. Parenting is very humbling. If you want to be humble, become a parent. And so I'm going to tell you a little story about how we tried to talk to our children about climate change years back that illustrates this. So Jamie had gotten a hold of a copy of Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and so we had the kids assembled on the couch, all 4 of them. I think Izzy was a toddler. Our neighbor Patrick, who was a frequent visitor, was there, and we proceeded to show them that movie, An Inconvenient Truth, which if you've ever seen it is an amazing movie. It won an Academy Award. Okay, so the movie's rolling. These are little kids sitting on the couch, and all I can remember is there was a lot of ominous music, and there were a lot of smokestacks and scary-looking stuff up there on the screen, and pretty soon somebody was crying. It was probably me, right? So somebody's crying, so the television went off, and so how do we talk to kids about this? How do we talk to kids about global warming? It's kind of a scary topic. As an aside, Jamie was to use this same kind of group education technique a few years earlier to talk about the facts of life. That was really interesting, but that's something for another day. But let's just say different genders and different ages have very different reactions to that information. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. So I did give a lot of thought to how can we talk to children about this without scaring them? How do we talk to ourselves about this without scaring ourselves? It's no wonder that a lot of folks are in denial. It's no wonder that we're overcome with inertia. We wondered, does the one little thing I do make a difference? The connection sometimes between our action and some sort of tangible outcome can be pretty thin. Well, I'm going to sum up real quickly my answer to these concerns. How do we talk to children about this? How do we talk to ourselves about it? I'm going to give you 3 quotes from 3 of my favorite people. The first one talked to children a lot. His name was Fred Rogers. When the horrible incidents happened in Sandy Hook, Mr. Rogers had already passed away. I didn't watch a lot of television. I didn't want to be burdened with those images, but I listened to NPR. I listened to public radio, and many people played Mr. Rogers' words of comfort at that time, and Mr. Rogers said, when I was a little boy and there were very scary things that happened in the world, my mother would say to me, Fred, look for the people who are helping. Look for the people who are helping. And that brings me to my second quote, which is Mahatma Gandhi, we must become the change we wish to see in the world. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We can't project it out there. We have to become that change. And that brings me to my third quote, by Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small, committed group of individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So I hope that this won't be just another Earth Day service, but rather this will be an opportunity for folks who are interested to begin to explore together what we can do, because I think that it's that community and that connectivity that are the key to making a difference. So So we have a great fun time planned afterwards. I understand we have some food, and we have the opportunity to share and talk with our speakers, and I think we can begin as a congregation to address this issue as well. All right? Thank you.
Alice light has gone out on its
Oh.
in the time capsule, so if you're here today, sign it. And make sure your name's in there when we open it, whenever, which hasn't been decided yet. We'll decide that at some time in the future. And so, yes, everybody stand, hold hands, sing our closing song.